welcome back, everybody. Those of you who've been around for a while remember that I did a podcast episode with Sarma Melngailis last year, I think. Was it a year and a half ago? Was it a year and a half ago?
Yeah, a year and a half
Yeah.
ago, March 2024.
Yes, March 2024. Wow. And for those of you, in the cult space, in the narcissism space, if you have not seen the Netflix show Bad Vegan, where have you been? But that's part of the problem we're going to talk about as well, because that show is incredibly misleading and does Sarma no favors. And what Sarma has done in the meantime, we've spent a lot of time the last few months talking, and what Sarma has done in the meantime is she's written a book, and the book is now out. So we want to talk with Sarma about that and all things cultish. So thank you for coming back to get interrogated by me again. I appreciate it.
Yes. No, thank you for having me back. And I re-listened to that episode, and it remains one of my favorites to send to people if they want more information about what happened to me beyond Bad Vegan. It's just is very comprehensive. And it just remains one of my favorites. And we covered so much that I thought, like, oh crap, what are we going to talk about now?
There's always going to be
my
something.
my whole book is out, so it's there's a lot more in my book that's goes way beyond what was in Bad Vegan. But yeah, I'm just happy to be back. I love talking with you.
So you know what? Let's just start with talking about the book. So the book is The Girl with the Duck Tattoo. By the way, the other day I kept on saying dragon tattoo. I said it's not dragon tattoo, it's duck tattoo.
Yeah.
There's so many places we could start, but I think the first thing I want to just talk about is why the book, why it was so important for you to write the book.
It's funny. I mean, I started writing the book a long time ago. I mean, 8 years ago. After this happened, I started writing. I knew that I was going to eventually write this book and put it out. I had no idea it was going to take me so long. I think that in the end, it's good that it took me. I think it needed to take that long because, as you know, and as anybody that's been through this knows, it takes quite a while to heal. And it takes quite a while. Like, it's a slow process and a gradual process to get to understanding, and an ongoing process. I'll probably still be learning things about it, really understanding what happened. So I think had I somehow rushed it and gotten it out, 5 years ago, which I theoretically could have done, it would be a much different book. And I think it really needed the time for me to process what happened. And it was really difficult to write. You're reliving what happened. And in my case, and I'm sure others can relate to this too, there's so much that you don't remember. There's just huge blank spots. And I was puzzling things together based on a huge trove of G chats that are sort of like text messages, but over the computer, that I recovered. And that was really helpful, going through an old journal that had been recovered of mine, just going through whatever bits of evidence I could find to piece together what happened and to try to make sense of it. And, I'd be reminded of things that I just don't have any recollection of. And, there were some video clips that he had taken on his phone that I was able to get a hold of on the other side of my criminal case as part of the evidence, where he's videoing me. And I barely recall those moments, if at all, which is just surreal to see yourself on video and have no recollection of those events, or in some cases, maybe it's very hazy and fuzzy, or I'd forgotten about it. And then, you remember. I mean, there's one video clip where I had just thrown like a whole bunch of Ambien in my mouth, and I'd forgotten about it. I mean, now once I saw it, I was, oh yeah, that happened, but I had forgotten about it. So yeah, it was a lengthy process to put that book together, and to put it together in a way and in a sequence that would be engaging and digestible and useful for the reader, and in a way that, it moves fast, it has a good pace, it keeps people engaged. And I think it succeeds there. One comment I hear most often is oh my God, I started your book and I can't put it down, which I love. And the other one I really love is I hear from people who say they stopped reading books or they don't read books anymore because it's like an attention thing. I think everybody's attention has been eroded by the world that we live in. Or maybe it's like an ADD type of a thing, but I've heard from a lot of people who said that they have a hard time reading books, but they're able to read mine, and it's like the first book they've read in years and they're enjoying it. So that really means a lot to me.
That's awesome. I told you, because I've read your book now, I would say I read your book 2.25 times, because I started reading an earlier manuscript, and then at a certain point you say, hey, no, I have a new manuscript.
Yeah.
And I read that twice. And one of the things I said to you after finishing it the first time is, oh my God, it's harrowing.
Yes.
And I want to kind of explain to my audience why, because I don't want to dissuade people from reading it, but it was because it was taking me back into my own journey of dissociation and becoming the sort of the fall into the alternate cult self. Because you and I have talked about this a lot, like what they do is they actually create sort of a cult persona. It's not you. Like the real you gets left behind, and there's this alternate you that is created to deal with the extreme trauma and the crazy bullshit that's going on. And so reading your book, especially reading his messages, just the word salad and the constant, the wearing you down, I was like, oh my God, this is so familiar. This is so familiar. And it really was an intense read for me, because I want people to read this book, and there's so many reasons, but one of the reasons I want people to read this book is it will give you a deep insight into what it's like to be coerced at the level that you were over the period of time that you were.
Yeah.
Because you and I spoke about, like, the Netflix series makes it seem like it wasn't that long, but this was years.
Yeah, that's true. A lot of people have said that to me, that when they realized that this took, this was years of my time, somehow the Bad Vegan show on Netflix gave the impression that, maybe it was like 6 months or something, but this was years. And it started really slow too. I mean, it's heartbreaking how many times I thought I was never going to see him again. I thought, all right, this guy, there's something not right about him. I'm not going to continue seeing him. And then he'd find some way to get back into my life. Repeatedly that happened. And so there were, some large stretches of time in between that. But what he did to me happened over quite a period of time. And it was like this slow thing, you don't see it happening. It's just, it's happening. And of course, I was, at the same time, I was very busy and preoccupied with my business and so much going on all the time that I wasn't stopping to, I wasn't meditating. I wasn't stopping to think about, how do I really feel about this? I was just sort of charging forward, and then that made it that much easier for him to, to kind of get his hooks in me, or get me to do what he wanted me to do.
Hey, quick interlude. If you're liking these conversations and want to help me keep expressing what is on my mind, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and maybe even follow the podcast wherever you listen. And if you want to go a step further in supporting the show and getting access to some behind-the-scenes rants, you can join me over on Patreon. That's patreon.com/Mark Vicente. It really does make a difference. All right, back to the episode. Yeah, and you and I, we've spoken about this, but like, it really, your entire experience maps the cult experience of being, indoctrinated, the dissociation,
yes.
the head. I can say it now. I think I'm 7 minutes past, so YouTube won't be upset, but the head fucking.
Yeah.
That went on. And I'm really hoping, and I'm sure you are too, I'm really hoping that people read this and they understand how much was left out of the Netflix series. I mean, I just want to hear from you. Like, what's the stuff, now that you've spent time, you've written the book and you've, been talking a bunch publicly again, like, what's the stuff you really wish had been addressed a few years ago?
Well, you mean in Bad Vegan?
Hmm.
What? Yeah, I mean, first of all, I think I mentioned this in the last podcast. There was absolutely nothing in the show whatsoever that explained from anybody else's perspective or even mine, but I wasn't the best one to comment on this, is how this happens. So, they interviewed Dr. Evan Stark, who wrote the book on coercive control, who apparently said, if I'd have anything to do with her case, she never would have gone to jail. Because if anybody's like listening to this for the first time, I ended up, serving time in jail over what happened as well. So there was no discussion of that. They had also interviewed Hoyt Richards, who spoke very articulately about how something similar happened to him, and that wasn't included. So, and they left out all of the sexual abuse. They left out that I had been in a situation like this prior. They left out a lot of things that would have really allowed the viewer to truly understand what happened, versus keeping the viewer or versus allowing the viewer to kind of come to. And I think this was, I feel quite sure that this was done intentionally. I mean, that's my opinion, but I think it's reasonably clear that it was intentionally presented in a way that by the end of it, the audience could come to one conclusion or another. And then, of course, I've spoken about this quite a bit now, but they misused this audio recording in the end, and they presented it as if I was caught on a hot mic, and they, even worse, moved my words around so that what he says and my response is not what I really said. My response was the opposite. And so that part at the end, I mean, I can't tell you how many messages I got that were some version of, oh, I felt bad for you throughout that show until the call at the end when I realized you were in on it the whole time. Like, and just, and then on top of that, people thinking that, I profited off that show, which I did not. The filmmakers profited handsomely, immensely. And so one of the things about going through situations like this is very often it's not just the pain of the original situation and thing that happened. It's then the subsequent layers of the pain of being misunderstood, or the pain of being criminalized, or the pain of having the tabloids report what happened totally incorrectly or in a very misleading way, or the pain of having a Netflix show which becomes number one on Netflix that also misrepresents you, and then kind of getting yelled at, and I always say that at the same time there were lots of people who were very sympathetic and understood what happened, but it's these sort of ongoing layers of an injury that I still feel, because I still am faced with people that don't really understand what happened, or they watch the Netflix show and they think, well, there must be something wrong with her. She must be unstable, or, it doesn't make sense to them. How could I be an intelligent, smart person, but have gotten into this situation? And therefore, maybe I must be crazy in some way.
Yeah.
And that's just really, really painful. And it, frankly, it's hard to try to, in some sort of a Zen way, sort of move on and it's hard to move on from something when you're just continually faced with the consequences on a daily basis.
Yeah.
Um,
100% understand that. I mean, I've had a version of that, not as intense as yours. And you and I have chatted about that. Just so my audience knows, Sarma and I have chatted a lot.
yeah.
We had a lot of sort of off podcast, off screen time. And I think also, the thing and I mentioned this to you before privately. The thing about Bad Vegan is it could have been an incredible case study to help people understand how these things work and to free people. Like the amount of people that could have been freed But instead, and this is one of these things that happens in Hollywood, it's sort of like, hey, you know what? How fucked up can we make this thing? What if? What if, like, for 4 episodes, you think she's the good guy, and then you realize, no, she's the bad guy? I'm like thinking, okay, yeah, you could do that, and that's the kind of shit I thought in film school. Like, how do you make this thing more fucked up? And it was an incredible missed opportunity. But the good thing, I'm not saying it's good because of that, but the
Yeah.
good thing is with your book. Your book is an incredible case study in understanding, well, how does an intelligent person fall for this? How does indoctrination work? How does the level of sort of propaganda work? And you and I spoke about, like, when I read your book, I was like, oh, this is a prisoner of war scenario, because everything I studied about prisoners of war, I'm like, I think I told you there was the after the, I think it was the Korean War or something, a bunch of American soldiers, a whole bunch of them didn't want to come back. They'd been so indoctrinated against America, they didn't want to come back. And there was some psychologist that wanted to understand, like, how did this happen? Because they thought they'd been tortured, physically tortured. And they realized actually the soldiers had not been physically tortured. They'd been under long-term indoctrination and coercive control. They didn't use that word at that time. So that the soldiers' minds were completely dissociated from who they really were, and they thought America was the enemy. And so when I read your book, I was like, oh, that's what happened, And I wish that had been explained. So for me, the book is a very visceral, somatic experience of what it's like to get slowly eroded as you were.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, people really should get your book. That's what I'm saying.
It just occurred to me for the first time. I don't know why it's only occurring to me now in this moment, but I I don't know how I would ever know this, or if he would, but I wish the judge in my case would read my book. Not just for me, because my case is already over and done with, but for anybody else who comes after me. Because the judge, at least, because just in thinking about the ongoing consequences, it certainly isn't helpful that I pled guilty to crimes. But what people who haven't been through the criminal justice system often don't understand is that people plead guilty all the time because that's the easier option. That's the only way out. Like, that's it. You got to plead guilty and just hope that you'll maybe get probation or, but the idea of going through a trial with the expense and the risk that, your case is going to be further misunderstood and certain evidence won't be allowed in and the jury isn't going to understand it. And just the fear and the terror of it, like the going through a trial wasn't going to happen. But with the combination of Bad Vegan being told the way that it was and the fact that I pled guilty, it makes it very easy for people to assume that I'm guilty and I'm a criminal, because I spent time at Rikers and was sentenced to jail. And that's just sort of another piece of it. And I would be really curious to know if the judge in my case, who seemed to understand, he said when he sentenced me, he said that there was plenty of evidence, or that it seemed clear that I tried to run my business in good faith. So he at least seemed to understand that something messed up went on. I think the prosecutor was of a psychology that she quite enjoyed the prosecution of me and seeing me get sentenced and the smile on her face when I pled guilty and when I was sentenced. But that's a whole other
I wonder
topic.
what for the prosecutor, her, I wonder what you represented in her psyche that she disliked. Because everybody talks about, like, oh, the justice is blind. Justice is not blind at all. But I'm really
No.
curious about, because as you know, I've been up against prosecutors, and it's really interesting that sometimes their pathology is like, what the fuck?
Well, I mean, more than anybody that there are. I mean, if you read that book, Confessions of a Sociopath, which I tell people about all the time, she works as a criminal defense attorney. And I think that that prosecution and that the criminal justice system is one of those areas where certain types of people are often attracted to for the precise wrong reasons, right?
Yeah.
There's sort of the really good people who are really want to uphold justice and want the right thing to happen, and then there are those who just want to win and at all costs. I mean, how many, the whole Project Innocence thing, it's just unbelievably it's just unbelievable how
Hmm.
many cases of wrongful conviction there are when the prosecutors knew, when they knew, and they sent people to death row or
Yeah.
life sentences when they knew. And the fact that's okay and that they're not prosecuted for having done that is something that really ought to, it's just completely messed up in our
It
system.
is. It
Um,
is. I wanted to ask you about something else because you and I have spoken about this privately. I don't know you've spoken much about it publicly, but just to give my audience some perspective, one of the things I've always said is that, what is the commonality between people that get fooled and hoodwinked,
yeah.
and we're idealists. That's one thing. We're idealists. The other thing is, it's not like we went to school to learn how to lie and to learn how to spot liars, So we take things at face value. Um,
Yes.
I don't think I do that anymore, but like I did for a long time. So you went and got yourself tested to see if there was anything additional. So can you just talk a bit about what you found out?
Yeah, well, one of the interesting things on the other side of Bad Vegan was that in the fire hose of, comments coming at me, I was getting a ton of people reaching out saying, "Hey, I think you might be on the spectrum. Have you ever gotten a diagnosis? I think you may have Asperger's, or what used to be called Asperger's now is called Autism 1." And I was getting that comment so frequently. And there were, some lady made like a TikTok video of making a case of why it's clear that I'm autistic. Or there was some YouTube videos where people did these 45-minute analyses of Bad
Wow.
Vegan and my person. I mean, it was bizarre and weird and strange to watch those things. But there was enough of that it seemed to make sense to go get an actual, not just like go online and do a quiz, but to go to a professional where it's like a whole day long thing and they interview your family and do all kinds of weird testing with like shapes and boxes. And so I did that and ended up getting a diagnosis of Autism 1, which makes a lot of sense and makes a lot of things make more sense to me, also about my childhood and how I've felt my entire life, and not quite understood why I felt that way. But I think it's useful it's useful to know because it just helps put a framework around, it just helps to understand that I have certain tendencies, and I'm not qualified to quite understand what it is about that sort of wiring that makes one more likely to take things at face value. And I think that, there's nothing special about me getting that diagnosis. I think a lot of people who reach out to me, when I learn about them, I think to myself, oh yeah, they would probably also get a similar sort of diagnosis. And I read somewhere in one of the books about females with Autism 1 or Asperger's that it's almost guaranteed that we're going to get abused and manipulated. It's like, it's going to happen. Um,
Yeah, it's so interesting. When you told me that, I was like, oh my, that actually makes sense. Part of it made sense because you're very fucking smart, like brilliant smart. And I'd been accused, not accused, I've been asked so many times, how the fuck did you, like, you're smart, how did you fall for it? And then so when I met you and spoke to you, and then you told me that, I was like, well, that makes perfect sense. The thing that's interesting about it as well, though, is that I think you told me this. You said to me that you are not able to see duplicity very clearly at
yeah.
the beginning.
Or, uh, I mean, until it's kind of thrown in your face. I mean, after what happened to me, after the situation that occurred, that Bad Vegan covered, that my book covered, and I'll potentially write another book, I stepped into another situation and my guard was down because I thought, I'm in piles of debt. It's public knowledge. I have nothing to take money wise. I have nothing to take. So why would somebody prey on me now? It wouldn't make any sense. And somebody came into my life and, you know, fucked shit up and caused all kinds of problems. And when I sort of it it didn't last that long. It was less than 6 months, but when it sort of clicked and I realized what was happening, it felt to me in some weird way that I had this funny feeling that there was some universe or some count like going, oh, like that they had seen me and said, she needs another lesson. Oh, we're gonna have to put her through. She needs another lesson. And so I found myself, this is true, I found myself looking up and saying, I get it. I get it. I got it. Okay, message clear. I get it. And yet, even after that, I found myself in situations professionally with potential business partners who then took advantage of me or were duplicitous, lied, misled me, had bad intentions. Again, I didn't see it, or I just thought, well, I know these people. I've known them for a while. They would never do that. And yet there were certain red flags, including saying something like, oh, we're not going to hurt you. Or very often that's a red flag when somebody comes out and says they're not going to do the thing that you didn't suspect that they would do. It's like if you got into a relationship with somebody and the other person was like, just so you know, I'm never going to cheat on you. You'd be like, what?
Why are we talking about
Like,
this?
that's probably, yeah, it's probably a reasonable indication that you should look out for that.
Yeah.
It's sort of like when they tell you they're not going to do the thing that you wouldn't have thought that they would do.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
so I found myself on the other side of it professionally too.
and that's what happened. I mean, I told you this, and you agreed a while back, a few months ago. Like bad vegan did exactly the same thing to you. Like they literally did to you what was already done to you.
Yeah, and that was another situation where I could not have imagined that the director and the people responsible for making that show could have read that Dear Mr. Fox letter, which I had posted online subsequently, but that was one of the first things the director read when deciding about whether to work on this project. Having read that letter and all the evidence supporting that, it's very clear that's what really happened. And knowing that that's what I went through, that I'm in all this debt, that I've gone through this hell, and then to deliberately make a show that's going to be misleading is going to lead to a lot of people thinking I'm a criminal and comparing me to like Anna Delvey and other con artists. To me, that's diabolical, and so it never occurred to me that they were going to do that. And in fact, it was humiliating because I was the one. I spoke to Evan Stark and asked him to yes, will you please do this? They're making a show. It's going to help expose coercive control and psychological manipulation. And I asked Hoyt Richards if he would do it, and I was the one who convinced my family that yes, this is going to be a good project. Please take an entire day out of your life and travel and come and sit for these interviews. And I got all these people to do it because I thought they were going to do an honest project.
Yeah.
And again, it's these sort of painful, shocking wake ups that everybody isn't good and working and operating in good faith. And it's really, it's painful every time that happens. And I'm much, much, much more aware of it. And I have, at least in the last couple of years, there were a couple of, for example, business partnerships that I quickly got myself out of because I realized these people didn't have good intentions, and I saw it quickly. But
it's a double-edged sword, this whole I'm not going to call it Pollyanna, but this whole way to view the world as a place full of hope and possibility, and that all people have redeeming qualities. It's really beautiful. And I have lived my life that way a lot. And just the other side of it is like how we miss these things because we can't imagine, because our nervous system doesn't operate that way. So we cannot imagine having all the information about somebody and then doing something that will devastate them.
And I think that there's, because I've been critical of other people who say that everybody's good and everybody has good and evil in them, and there's nobody who isn't redeemable. And no, there are, as you well know, there are sociopaths, there are malignant narcissists. They will never change. They're dark, dark, dark energy, whatever you want to call them, people. You could call it evil, whatever it is. And I'm well aware of that. But I think there's this other kind of fuzzy category of people that do really bad shit in some kind of a subconscious way almost, or that their ability to rationalize it is so powerful, or they're the opposite of introspective. They walk around in sort of a haze. And so they find a way to justify it. And I bet there's a lot of that in Hollywood where the people aren't, if you put them in a situation where, they could get this pot of money if they strangle the kitten or something, like they're probably not going to do, they're not just inherently evil. They're not sociopathic, total malignant narcissists, but they're operating in a way and maybe conditioned, and maybe they have some characteristics of narcissism, but there's some sort of a level of probably willful denial that they're harming people. I don't know. I'm sort of like, I'm just spouting this stuff, but I feel like there's this category of people that will, some of the people more recently that have done really surprisingly devastating, hurtful things. And I think they just find a way to justify it, or they think in some way that what they're doing is the right thing, or who knows. But it's like, it's sort of an in-between category. And so even my having the awareness that there are very dark, evil people out in the world, and sometimes I find myself able to spot it almost in an intuitive way, where somebody just seems a bit too charming, and I get this weird sort of spidey sense that that person's probably, I sense darkness there. But yeah, I think there's sort of an in-between category where
I love what you're saying.
They're not aware what they're doing.
Bonnie and I have been talking about this a bunch. So I just want to say one thing quickly, which is like, I've learned more and more, if you just analyze data, like what a person's saying, you can't tell what's going on. You have to like bring your body online to feel, right? And this is what Bonnie's an expert at now, is she's like, her spidey senses are very strong. And if she's creeped out, she's like, I don't mean to say my wife's a dog, but you know how dogs can tell?
Yeah.
Like my wife is like, she feels something and I don't feel it sometimes. And she says, something's wrong. And then I find out. But what you're saying is so interesting, because I do agree. I think there's people that are in this unconscious haze that they're not very connected to themselves. And part of it, I think, is massive dissociation. So that they don't want to go inside. So they do all this stuff and then they do something and they get told that thing you did was terrible because of blah, blah, blah. The problem is they don't want to reflect on that, because then they have to deal with some buried shame that they don't want to look at.
Yeah.
That's what I'm seeing more and more.
Yeah. I mean, there's people that I've interacted with who I can see that, like it correlates, I think, with people who are workaholics. They're always busy doing stuff, always around other people. Maybe they're drinking, maybe they're hypersocial, they're working all the time. Like they cannot stop. And they're the types of people that just would never stop and relax and do nothing or take time off, because that would mean that they would have to confront themselves and what's really going on. And they don't want to do that. So they're just going to keep barreling forward.
Exactly right. And I do think that's a kind of narcissism as well. I just don't think it's consciously malignant. Like I don't see them trying to
Yes.
destroy people. They just want what they want, and then they just deny the evidence because it would be too destabilizing to their version of themselves that they hold in their mind, right?
Yeah, exactly. If you try to point out what they've done, they'll get hyper defensive and pull that little Darvo thing. How dare you say that I would do that?
Ah, Darvo.
But you did it.
Listen to us.
I'm
Like
just
we went
pointing it
through hell and
out.
now we understand a bunch of things. Um, there's something else that I wanted to express to my audience because I've expressed it to you that when I read one of the earlier, wasn't the Subway letter, but one of your earlier blogs. I don't remember what year it was.
Yes.
The
Yeah. The
2008,
very old one.
the old one.
Yeah, it was very, yeah, it was a very old one where I mean, it's almost shocking to me how open I was, but it was a very kind of pouring out my soul of all my frustrations and angst, and in it, all my hopes and dreams and all of the things that were frustrating to me. And as you know, I think was like handing Mr. Fox a roadmap.
The keys to the kingdom. I mean, I said to you, because, in my whole, breakdown of how cults work, I talk about data mining. I think we discussed this in our last episode as well. But when I read that more recently again, I was like, oh my God, he figured everything out about you. And I'd said to you as well, you did not stand a chance. Once I read that, and I read it through the eyes of a predator, your openness, your vulnerability, your talking about what you wished for, what you dreamed for. If somebody would just come in and do this, it would be amazing. And then he modeled all of those things and mapped out all your fears and insecurities. And I said to you, you did not stand a chance. There is no way this could have gone another way because of how much he mapped out everything about you. Because in your writing, and this is what's so great about your writing as well, it's like you're able to you dig in there and you just rip things out and you sort of pour them out on the page. And I'm like, it's profound to read. But when I read that old one, I was like, oh no, don't say that. I know it's true. I know it feels true. Don't say that.
Yeah. Yeah, I appreciate that. And I can't, I mean, everything I say, I feel like you know and understand. It is so, I don't know what the right word is. It's like a bomb, BALM, not bomb, BOM. It
Yeah.
feels so good to hear that I didn't stand a chance because, as you know, we're constantly faced with other people not understanding. How could you have allowed this to happen? How could you not have seen it? Like, it's our fault. I mean, some woman in my DMs just the other day read my book and then sent me this series of DMs, and she kept saying, I hope you know it's not your fault. It wasn't your fault. It was your fault. And I was reading them and burst into tears like Matt Damon and she was Robin Williams, Good Will Hunting. It just to hear that it just feels really good and nice because we're confronted with feeling like it's our fault most of the rest of the time.
Yes, absolutely. And the other thing, I think I said this to you. I think I did. When I finally watched Bad Vegan, because it took me a while, because I knew I'd be really, really angry. And then you remember when I finished watching it, we had a conversation. I was really fucking angry.
Yeah.
Um, but one of the things I looked at is I thought to myself, you should never have gone on camera. You should never have been on camera. Like it was way, way too early. And I could kind of say the same thing of myself and a bunch of people in the vow too, because like we were just so fucked up.
Yeah.
But the thing I'm realizing more and more, I'm still trying to figure stuff out. Like I had a conversation with a psychologist in Europe the other day who has studied every single thing about the Nixium case and about me that was available. And she wanted to talk, and she's doing a paper on understanding how people shift and how they change. Like not so much how do they get brainwashed, how do they wake up from brainwashing? And I said, yeah, I'd be happy to be part of your interviews and studies and whatever, because I realized like I'm still trying to figure stuff out. Like,
Oh yeah.
right?
Yeah, I'm same way. And if some psychologists out there want to analyze my story and have more of the source data and read my entire journal, like, have at it. I would love that. I would love for somebody
You know what? I'm going to
to
put you in
want to
touch with this
study it in
person.
that
I'm
way.
going to put you in touch with this person because I think that might be very interesting. Because I'm also trying to still map out, like, okay, how did I fall asleep? And by fall asleep, just so my audience understands, like, there's a dissociation that occurs. You become this alternate self. Like, I remember some of the steps of falling asleep, and I remember a lot about waking up. But what's interesting now, I don't know if you feel this way. When I look back at, because there's still video material and written stuff from, me being in the cult, and some of it I feel a bit quite removed from. I'm like, I don't understand how I said that. I don't understand how I thought that.
Yeah.
Because I'm having a hard time putting myself back in the conditions to fire my nervous system in the same way, which I think is what was so profound about your book, because I felt in your book, like, you helped me get to a lot of places like that because you seem to be able to do it. But a lot of it's fuzzy because, and this is the thing that people don't understand, especially towards the end, before you get arrested, there is a level of fuzziness. You talked about this robotic zombie-like state that
Hmm.
you just can't think properly. And then people judge you as though you were a rational person able to make
Right.
rational decisions, which you were not.
Right. It's almost like as if, some component of your brain and was turned off, and you're able to go out and, interact with the barista and get a coffee and talk to people and have conversations and appear normal, but part of you is just not there. And uh, which leads to also having a very fuzzy memory of it. And I think that's why I quoted quite a bit from this book called Brain on Fire, a memoir about this woman who had a brain disease, didn't understand that she had it for quite a while, and so didn't understand why she was behaving so strangely and blah, blah, blah. And then I make the case that I've resonate so much of that book resonated to me and or resonated with me, but I make the case that it was as if my brain was on ice, like part of it was numbed. And again, I'm sure you were in this situation all the time where people are asking you to explain, well, what were you thinking when? What were you feeling when you did this or he did that? Or what were you thinking? What were you feeling? And it's like, I wasn't thinking or feeling. What do you
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
Well, I just wasn't. I was just operating and moving and frozen. And it's
Yeah.
very bizarre thing for people to try to comprehend if they haven't been through it, which
Yeah.
is funny because I think that now, for the most part, I'm so far on the other side of being dissociated, where I think that a lot of people out in the world today are in sort of a low grade dissociation.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And when we go through these wildly traumatic situations, getting brainwashed, blah blah blah, we go into like hardcore dissociation, and then through the healing process you really come home to yourself, and then you're in the whatever the opposite of dissociation is, sort of very in tune with how you're feeling most of the time. But I find myself, if something, I mean, I could get an email or I walk into a bank, like there's all these things that feel scary to me, a lot of financial stuff and worries and things. And if I'm confronted with something, I can easily feel myself freezing up very quickly. But I think that I operate for the most part very awake and in tune and in touch. Um, so I don't know where I'm going with that, but I
No,
think
no,
that a
that
lot
makes
of people operate on like a low grade dissociation where
that absolutely makes
they're not,
sense.
they don't want to be confronted with their feelings, or they're not, when something triggers me, right? Quotes, when something really irritates me or upsets me, that's not something that anybody would be irritated or upset by, but I always stop and think, what is that? Why is that happening? What it is
Hmm.
that, what's going on there? And I don't think many people are doing that.
No, I think that that's very accurate. I realize more and more that's one of the preconditions of being fooled. I realize like the reason advertising works is because, you know, people have these yearnings and they have these fears, and somebody offers them something that's going to make the fear feel better and fulfill
Yep.
the yearning, and they just go, great, I'll buy it. And then those
Right.
same people say to me, I don't understand how you got in a cult. I'm like, did you just see what you just did? The unnecessary thing you just bought because of a 30-second commercial? Now let's
Yeah.
talk about that for years. But I do agree with you. There is this low level. I'm seeing it a lot. In fact, there's a neuroscientist, Heather Berlin, who wrote a paper, and I want to actually get her on and talk to her about dissociation, because I feel like as a society, everybody is so disconnected. And I agree with you. And I think that was one of the hard things for me as I woke up. And I know you know this, the level of trauma that hits your nervous system, that obliterates you, it seems. And then you're very dysregulated, but you start feeling stuff that you haven't felt before, or not in a long time. And you wake
Yeah.
up from the fog, right? Because you had that.
Y- Yeah. And what's interesting and not surprising, knowing what I know, is that, you know, for example, that year that he took me away, or when he was putting me through all that stuff, I didn't cry that much. Or there were times when I broke down, and oddly enough, those were the times that he filmed me. There were times that I came apart, but especially that year when he took me away, I was really like next level frozen. And I wasn't crying every day. I just was in a frozen, dissociated state. And whatever thawing has happened, and it's strange because even on the other side of this, I think, you know, you come out of it and you very often get thrown into survival. Okay, I don't have any money. How am I going to make money? How am I going to survive? What am I going to do? And so you're kind of still in this survival mode. And I'm still in it too. There's a lot of stressful things happening, but I also have enough quiet time where, uh, I mean, I don't know if it's weird to say this. I cry almost every day, not just a little
That's
bit, but a
great.
lot, a
Wow.
lot. Yeah. And it feels like I mean, sometimes I think, am I crying out, you know, tears of like past generations where they repressed everything? That's how much I'm crying, and I'm just used to it. And I'm glad for it because it feels like I'm getting stuff up and out. But sometimes I think to myself, like, oh my God, like how I feel like I've cried everything out. Really, there's more,
Mm,
there's more, there's more. And I
mm,
just keep crying. I mean, did it this morning. It's part of
mm.
why I don't schedule appointments or things in the morning, because I kind of want that time in the morning to get it
Yeah.
up and out of my system.
I think
And
that's
it
healthy.
feels
I really do.
very healing. And I think I also didn't cry a whole lot when I was a kid. So maybe it's just a
Yeah.
lifetime of snuffing stuff down.
Yeah.
But um
You know,
yeah, I mean
I told a friend of yours, who we both know, that I don't know how you survive this. Like when I read, yeah, Bad Vegan, sure. And then when I read your book, I was like, I don't understand how you survived it. Like, and anybody who thinks they can easily survive this shit, they don't know what the fuck they're talking about. Like once you read the book, anybody with an ounce of humility would be like, I do not understand how she survived. So to me, it makes perfect sense that you're still quote unquote emotionally purging stuff.
yeah, I mean, I really appreciate that too. I Dr. Christine Cochilla, she said the same thing after reading the book. She said, frankly, I don't know how you're still standing. And I appreciate that because sometimes I feel that, and especially when I've been in the situation of wanting to rebuild what was lost and restore what was lost. And yeah, and getting fucked with again. Like I how does that happen? Um
You know, I've been I've almost gotten into some dodgy situations with people again. You know,
yeah.
it's not as bad, but I don't know if you feel this. I think maybe you do. Like I've seen so much evil now, and then I meet somebody that seems to really understand me and get me, and is there for me and becomes what I think is a great friend. And then I realized, no, they weren't. It was all just, they were just running their own agenda. And I projected what I thought the friendship was based on what my ideal friendship is. And I fantasized and I made it up because they're not who I thought they were.
Yeah, I relate to that with some people that came to me early on about, wanting to be like the one and only backer and everything that I want to rebuild. And yeah, it's like it would be great to have the perfect version of that person. And people probably do this in relationships all the time where they're, they, they'll block out the little things that they don't want to see and project what they do want into that person and make all kinds of assumptions. And then very often you find out, yeah, that's not what that person intended, or
Yeah.
maybe they just wanted to get to know me because I don't know. Anyway,
But, but it's normal. And now that I've been
yeah,
studying a little bit more about evolutionary biology, it's necessary. Like, when you're 16 and you get the hots for somebody, that you make up that they're the most amazing person in the world, you go off and make babies and shit, like thousands of
right.
years ago, hundreds of thousands of years ago. That's how we're still here. So maybe delusion has its
Yeah.
place.
Yeah, I'm sure there's reasons for it. Now I really honor the stuff that's hard to articulate. So, of course, I feel like in-person meetings are incredibly important nowadays. Like, it's really all of that unconscious signaling that our bodies understand that we rationally don't understand is really matters a lot. So how you feel when you're interacting with people. And I've had some interactions recently where I just thought, huh, I feel completely at ease around this person. And huh, that's interesting. Like, that's something that I am conscious of paying attention to more
That's interesting.
versus, um,
And is it like you can just
you
feel you
know,
can just be you around people like that?
yeah, yeah. It's like a relaxed feeling where I'm not nervous about it. I don't have worries, and it just feels all right. Um,
Wow.
and I felt that. I don't know if I've talked about this, but I am working on this other project and with John, and it's such a difference. When I considered working with him to do another docuseries, all of my interactions, I felt that way. I felt very calm and very inspired and very just calm about it. It's hard to describe, but I noticed that more and more. And so I notice when it's the opposite, when something maybe makes me feel uneasy, or I feel like I have to prove myself to this person, or
Mm.
something's going on. It's hard to talk about because it's hard to articulate, but um,
And
I certainly pay more attention to that.
it makes sense though, because I'm thinking about, I mean, my best human being in my whole life is my wife, Bonnie. I can be, and it's always been this way. I can be so myself. And I think you're right. Like, I think the people I have the best friendships with, I don't have to hide parts of myself. Like, everything's fine. Yeah, I feel that too.
Yeah.
I feel that too. Um, you know, I have a sense of all the shit you've been through, like not even with strangers, but also, with Bad Vegan and all the other shit you've been through. But my sense is that you have a certain wisdom now that you didn't have before,
Oh yeah.
right? I mean, honestly, in the sort of 2 years that we've been chatting, like, you are able to articulate your internal world and experiences so much better. Like, how do you experience who you are now?
Um, I think that's I think that's right. I think every year that passes, I do feel more like myself, or more connected to myself. Um, in a way, do you know about Richard Schwartz and internal family systems,
Yes,
IFS?
yes, yes.
I love that whole model because it's so simple, but it's so incredibly useful when you think about all of the various parts of yourself, and the part that's scared, and the part that's ambitious, and the part that's depressed, and the part that's angry, and the part that's like all of these different parts of yourselves. And um, just having that awareness in itself is incredibly useful. But I think that, yeah, I think that going forward, I think that I don't I don't foresee many dysfunctional relationships going forward, because I just think I wouldn't get into them. I wouldn't allow them. I wouldn't put up with them. And I'm more open to just saying the stuff. I've done that a bit with my family. Uh, if anybody's written a very, very personal memoir before, there's a whole weird thing that happens around your family, and whether they read it or they don't read it, or their response to it or their lack of a response to it. And it's very heady. But instead of just not saying the stuff, I found myself more and more just saying how I feel about it, even if it might seem a little much for
Yeah,
them. I express myself more, and
right.
just sort of in a very like, fuck it, I'm just going to say how I feel kind of a way. And what ends up usually happening is that then you learn what's really going on, or you get a more honest response, versus people just kind of not wanting to talk about something.
Yeah. You know, I was thinking about, like, the act of you writing this memoir, which in many ways fills in a lot of the gaps and the misunderstandings that people have had. And the idea of like getting something off your chest. Do you feel a relief that it's out, or do you feel there's more that's less to come out?
Well, I certainly want to write another memoir. It's of course it's a very big project. I have a lot more I want to say about the situation I stepped into afterwards, more that I've learned, because this book, as you know, it's a lengthy book. I think it moves fast, but there's a lot there, and I needed to include enough of my background to include things that were relevant and would shed light on what he was able to weaponize in me. So, for example, the stories that I tell about my childhood are ones that make sense in the context of how he was able
Right.
to manipulate me.
Right.
Um, and then there's certainly a lot about, there's my journal entries, there's all of the dialogue between him and me to really take the reader through that. But there wasn't enough space and room for me to, and I put in sort of bits of reflection and analysis about what's really going on throughout the book. But I wasn't able to talk about the healing process and the other side of it. There's a lot
Yeah.
more that I would like to say, but it does feel like a relief that it's out, from the perspective of, I mean, still, I have people reach out to me that say, "Oh, I watched Bad Vegan. I don't really understand what happened. I want to ask you some questions." And I'm like, "Well, did you read the book? If you want to read the book and ask me some questions, great. But
Yes.
I'm
No.
not gonna take time to, you know, try to help make you understand something that you would probably understand if you read the book."
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it feels good. I mean, I'm doing like a little version of, on my Substack, I'm writing a story about what happened over the last couple of years, similarly, because it's it needs to be written down, and I need to have it I need to have it out of me on paper. Here's what happened over the last couple of years, because I'm constantly confronted by people saying, "I thought you were opening your restaurant. What happened?" Or,
Mm-hmm.
"Why didn't you sue Netflix?" Or why, certain questions that the only way I can answer them is through the context of what's happened over the last couple of years. And so I'm sort of doing a little mini version
Interesting. I
on
like that.
my Substack. And it's a bit of calling people out, but again, it's when people behave in certain ways and do certain things, I don't think there's anything wrong with calling it out and saying what happened, especially when I have to answer for the consequences. I'm suffering certain consequences
Yeah.
financially and otherwise that have been devastating to me. And then being in a position where like I have to explain it, but the only way to do so is to talk about behaviors of other people, and which I can back up. So anyway, that's
Yeah.
a bit long-winded, but there is certainly a lot more I want to say, and I feel like writing is really therapeutic. It's
I love that.
in a big way.
Well, you're a
It is
damn good
getting it out
writer,
of
let me tell
you.
you. I've told you this before. You're a damn good writer.
Thank
Do you
you.
have a copy of the book nearby or only behind you?
I do. I have that one behind me, and I have
I just wanted you
another
to
one
hold it
right
up so
here.
the audience can see the book. There we go. Yes, it is
Yeah.
worth
And then
reading.
there's Leon on the
Oh,
back, which
right.
I love. Yeah.
Right. I did get I got my copy from you in person finally, which is great. But it's currently sitting in
Yeah.
LA. I have to get it. Is there anything, just to sort of finish off, is there anything that you could share that you feel like sharing with people that have been through this kind of thing that you've learned?
Um, I I I get the sense that I've never really said this or thought about how to say it, but I've heard this from other people that have been through this stuff. I've heard this a lot from other people who have been through this, especially if it happened years ago, where as horrific as it all was, there's something about it that broke me open in a way that if I'd continued on with my business, and maybe I would have had this world changing successful business, but I might still have in some way been one of those people who operates in sort of a low grade dissociation where you're not really confronting what's inside of you in a way. And so there's something about going through these situations that rips you completely open, where you're able to, and this is hard to say because this would be a lot easier to say if I was financially secure, if stuff was in order, if like I didn't have all these stresses and worries and fears and whatever, and I was recovered. And but I can still say that there is some benefit to being completely broken open. Um, and so I can feel some gratitude for that, as weird as that sounds, even though it's strange because at the same time, I'm still feel very haunted by what happened. I still don't feel like my nervous system has recovered. Um, but there is something on the other side of it, and hopefully, I just wish that everybody that goes through this is able to have the space and the time to recover from it. And writing about it is helpful, grueling and painful as it can be to go through the story. Um, I think writing it out was helpful because it was like getting it out of me. It's out of me and it's out there. And really importantly is how much it helps to feel like my story is useful. So I think about, I know you've said this and you talked about this on other podcasts, where we're not educated as young people. We're not educated about certain dark triad personalities. We're not educated about what to look out for. And so the idea that my book could be read by a lot of younger people out there who could read it and really take in and understand that there are dark people out there. There are predators out there, and it happens in real life. I mean, there's novels too. What's so strange is I'm reading Joyce Carol Oates, an amazing writer, published a novel called Fox. And I wish I had it with me right here. It's actually next to my bed because I'm reading it. It came out right around the same time as my book, which, came out in July. It's exactly the same number of pages as my book. It's called Fox, and the main character is throughout the story known as Mr. Fox. and he is a dark, evil sociopath. And it's fascinating and eerie and chilling. So but I think these stories are very useful because, I mean, that's a fictional story, but what people should realize is that it's a fictional story based on real life characters. And this is like the real life version of it. And in that book, he's a fictional character, and it's a bit like Lolita. That's the subject matter, I'll just say, but it's chilling. And it's written very much from his perspective. So you hear him as the narrator talking about, like, you know, he gets confronted by this thing and he's like, oh, well, maybe I could just kill her, but then I'd have to dispose of the body. And that's going to be, like, it just, and the way that he talks about manipulating people and his thought process and his awareness of this intermittent, giving people praise and then slightly insulting them, and then giving them praise and then slightly cutting them down, and that's going to create a bond, and the awareness that he's doing that, and how charming he is and beloved he is by the people in his work and community. And he's that novel is, there are people like that out there all over the place. And I find it really fascinating. But I would hope that, if people read that, I don't know if they would necessarily internalize that that's real. It's not just a character in a novel or a movie. And my story is real. Mr. Fox, Anthony Strangis, now Anthony Knight. He changed his name to Anthony Knight. He's out there doing this to other people, and there are a lot of other people like him, and they very often, or almost always, come across as very charming. And so I don't know, I just rambled a bunch there, but
no, this is amazing. I love your advice. I just wanted to say, like, amen, sister. Yes, I love your advice, and I'm so grateful that you spend time talking to me, because I want people to hear your story. I'm also going to put in the show notes the different places that people can look at your Substack and where to get your book and stuff like that. And I just, thank you again for your time.
Yeah, thank you. You're certainly one of my favorite people of all time to talk to, just because you have such a good understanding of this, and I can't wait for your film to come out. And I hope we get to keep doing good collaborative stuff in this area, and help people understand.
Me too. And to my audience, as always, please stay very, very curious.